Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Tim Hendrickson. I'm the new Programs and Events Specialist over at the Mayor's Office in the City of Meridian. Appreciate you guys all joining us this morning. I know on my end, I was telling Dave that this was not how I envisioned my first coffee with the mayor. So thank you for everyone being flexible and joining us here. I know that as a city, we're excited to interact with you guys, given the current state of affairs with COVID-19. I know that given all the panelists who are here this morning, I know as a department, we're thankful for all of them being here. So thank you, everyone. To all the attendees this morning, again, thank you guys for joining us. I'm going to hand it over to Robert. And Robert, if you say a few words about everyone joining us and just kicking this off.
Thank you, Tim. And yes, appreciate everyone being here for our first Coffee with the Mayor. When we said we were going to evaluate everything we do for the first 6 months being in office, this is not how we envisioned modifying our Coffee with the Mayor. But we call it Coffee with the Mayor, but really what it is an opportunity for you to interact with city officials, get your questions answered, get feedback. And typically when we go out into the community and do these, we get a lot more neighborhood issues, questions, maybe something very specific, when's the Costco going to open, some of those type of things. But we put it out to the community beforehand and ask people to submit questions. And lo and behold, a lot of you have interest in what the city is doing related to COVID. How are our people doing? How are we looking at financially for the future? Things along those natures. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the questions that we've received today. Either myself, one of our directors, or our city council president will likely be the ones that weigh in from that standpoint. We will get through those. We also have a Q&A feature down below where you can feel free to submit. And if we have time, we will get to those questions as well. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you to everyone who submitted questions in advance to give us a good idea about what's on your hearts and minds currently. We do have a representative from each of our departments. Most of our directors are on. We do have, I think, one who is not here, but is represented by the planning division manager. So we're just going to go ahead and kick this off after I turn it over to Councilman Burnt to see if he has any words he'd like to mention right now.
Thanks, Mayor. So grateful to be here this morning. As my city council colleagues know, I was a big proponent of virtual meetings and public hearings. I felt like if we could do it, and if staff thought that we were capable of doing it, then we should do it. But as we've gotten deep into these virtual meetings, I believe that these virtual meetings could positively shape how we do meetings in the future. I've actually sort of enjoyed these virtual meetings. So we'll see where this takes us in the future. But watching our community stay engaged and serving others and has been absolutely amazing, in my opinion. People care, and we're in the middle of some interesting times. People helping people, we're finding creative ways in which to check in our friends and our family. I see people on Facebook posting posts on supporting local businesses and finding creative ways to communicate with one another and serving others. And this is the Meridian way. And so although we are in some interesting times, I think the good is coming out, and that's what I enjoy most. But grateful to be here this morning and to engage with the citizens and to answer some questions and to provide some clarity. So here we go.
Thanks, Treg. And people like this meeting, there's a city council meeting tonight that they can log on and be part of if they'd really like to, starting at 4:30. So with that, I do want to recognize just at least we do have several attendees, including Councilwoman Jessica Pro. I see she's on the line, as well as Senator Winder is joining us, and former Mayor Tammy, always my mayor, Mayor Tammy, So if there's any questions that I can't answer, perhaps we can go to one of those two if needed. And I see I've got a friend in here with me. So with that, Tim, why don't you take it over?
Awesome. So first question we have this morning, Robert, is going to be, would the Meridian Police Department patrol more often due to everyone being homebound, or is it, quote, business as usual?
And I know our police chief has been looking at the calls and responsibilities of the officers and preparing for what may come, but I'm just going to go ahead and turn this one over to him. Chief Levy.
Morning, everyone. So when I read the question, I was reading it as business as usual was kind of a bad thing. And we really think that business as usual is a good thing, because we are still patrolling 24/7. We're still handling all calls. We're still meeting our response times and such. Now, with that being said, we have adjusted our shift schedules. So there is fewer officers out there, and the reason why we have done it is to minimize exposure. If all of my officers get exposed in one incident, then I have nobody out there to patrol. So we've made some adjustments to the schedule. But also we have seen a decline in the general calls for service. On any given day, we would be at 240 calls for service within a 24-hour period. And every day since then, except one, we've been under 100. And so you will see more patrols out there, because as the officers aren't tied up, they'll be out there patrolling. But there is less cars out there, public-wise and police-wise, but we're still able to maintain our same level of service.
Awesome. Next question we have this morning, Robert, is going to be, what is the state of the city revenues now and projected over the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, and I think that's an important question, as we've all seen the impacts on our economy. So early on, when I started speaking with several of our local businesses, I knew that, it wasn't a secret, but this was going to be impacting people in various ways, where you start seeing restaurants and bars either shut down for good, closed temporarily, which would impact our city revenues. So we've been keeping an eye on this in terms of what it means for the city. And I think we've made some early adjustments as we even start looking at next year's budget. We've been very mindful of this issue. But I'm going to turn it over to our Treasurer, CFO, Todd Lavoie, and let him kind of get into some of the more specifics about what we're seeing and where we're headed.
Morning, everybody. Appreciate that, Robert. Yeah, so the question, how are we looking today in the next 3 to 6 months? I can give you confidence that the City of Meridian is in a strong manageable position from a financial place. We have a conservative nature in our heart for revenue projections. We've been working with the state and other agencies around the valley, trying to predict what the revenue impacts will be from this COVID-19 situation. Working with the other agencies in the state, we're projecting a 10 to 20% reduction in our state revenue sharing. So those are the revenue dollars generated by the sales from our businesses, so the sales tax revenue. The other revenue sources that we have here at the city, we don't see too much of an impact right now. Again, we are only 30 days into this, but for the time being, we don't see too many other impacts to our property taxes. We are adjusting our development and our recreation revenues, as those are impacting those revenues as well. For the fiscal 21 budget discussions. The upcoming summer months for our Parks Department, again, we are going to reduce some of those revenues for the remaining 6 months because of the stay-at-home situation. As Robert mentioned, we are working on our fiscal year 21 budget discussions as we talk now, and we are taking into considerations the impacts of the COVID-19 situation, and we are adjusting our revenues down for fiscal year 21 as well. And we're also looking at requests from our departments. We are asking them to try to keep a steady line to our fiscal year 20 budget. So when we present our 21 budget to our citizens, we are going to try to keep it as flat as possible to help manage the property taxes and help out the citizens the best way we can. But as the chief of police just stated, we also want to maintain our levels of service that you as citizens have expected from us. And along with the utility users, again, we are trying to help out our utility users for those individuals that are unfortunately having financial troubles. Again, we do have some resources available to them to assist them during this time of need. I think that sums up kind of what we're doing over the next 3 to 6 months, and a quick glance at our next 12-month and 18-month projection for revenues. Robert, I'm happy to answer any other questions for you.
Thanks, Todd. And I think I would just point out, as mentioned, we are trying to at least hold flat to last year's budget, maybe even below, depending upon where things come out when we see the numbers. But that's under the guise of at least 4% population increase over this last year, based upon numbers that we've seen from Compass. So holding flat ultimately will be a reduction in terms of service that we provide to the number of people in our community on one level or another. But that's where we are right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Next question we have, is it likely the governor will extend his emergency stay-at-home order to April 30th? Has the governor said what metrics he and his team are using to decide when he can lift the order?
That's a question I wish I knew the answer to all the way around. He has told us that he's going to have a press conference tomorrow at 11 o'clock to let the state know what his intentions are. I've said this previously, and what I do know is he has indicated that there likely would be a new order of some sort. Now that was over a week ago that he said that, but he didn't indicate what that order would be. If it would maintain a stay-at-home requirement, or if it would loosen that and go to some sort of other type of order. So we don't know. But what we do know is that he is working with the state, and I don't want to pronounce the word. If you want, Mark, if you want to help me pronounce the word for
state epidemiologist.
Thank you very much. That was our fire chief, but he's currently helping out do all the stuff related to COVID here in the community. But also with Central District Health and other health districts around the state, looking at information, speaking with our hospitals to find out what their current levels are, and getting feedback from cities and counties about what they are looking at. I know he's concerned about many of the same things that all of us are, whether you're elected official or not. And that's first and foremost the health and safety of the people, of our friends, our families, our neighbors, our children, and then also the economic reality of where we are and the impacts that has to be able to afford to pay for food, rent, and all the other things we have to deal with in our day-to-day lives. So those two things are combining in a way that we've never seen, and I know that those are all the things that he's looking at and taking into consideration currently. But I don't have any advanced information as of this point in time about what directions he's going to go. So we will just have to wait and see tomorrow what happens.
Awesome. Thanks, Robert. And this is a reminder to all the attendees, we are taking questions live. So if you do have a question while one of the panelists are answering, you can feel free to type those in the Q&A. We have one here. Mayor Robert, what actions have you taken for the Trump administration appointment that you have been given recently?
Well, just to clarify, it was an intent to appoint announcement from the Trump administration. No, his administration himself has not actually done the appointment yet. So I have not had any actions or interactions with the council that they're looking to appoint me to at this point in time.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question we have, are we seeing any significant changes in crime in the area since March? how many city first responders have contracted COVID-19? What more can the community do to assist the police and fire departments during this time?
And Chief Chief Wavy, I'm gonna have you start off this one because I did see a question that came up in the Q&A as well that was specifically asking about if we see an increased amounts of domestic violence since there's been the stay-at-home order in place. So if you wouldn't mind starting off, that'd be great.
Thanks, Robert. The question that I got online, I answered online, and everybody should be able to see it in regards to domestics, but I'll just rehash it here. We have not seen an increase in domestic violence crimes, but we haven't seen a decrease either. One of the things that we've seen is a decrease in general type calls, neighborhood type calls, but we still unfortunately have a steady amount of calls in domestics, crisis type calls, mental health issues. We have seen an increase in welfare checks. I think it's just people asking us to go check on the welfare of their loved ones and friends and family just because of the disconnect with the stay-at-home order. But we haven't seen a increase in those calls, but we have not seen a decrease either, which is unfortunate. To go further into the questions, no first responder has tested positive for COVID so far, knock on wood. We've had a few scares, and we've had a few people that have been under quarantines, and we've also have quite a few that have been tested, myself included. That was a fun experience. Going further into the questions about, and maybe Tim can clarify for me, was this the question that went into what our first responders needs and how we're doing?
Yes. So I can repeat it if need be. Are we seeing any significant changes in crimes in the area since March? Which you answered. How many city first responders have contracted it? Which you answered. And then what more can the community do to assist police and fire departments during this time?
Okay, so on this last question, I can answer both for police and fire, and Chief Niemeyer can sure pop in to clarify anything. I guess the thing that we ask the general public is before dialing 911, make sure that it is a true emergency. We need to leave that line of communications open for those true emergencies, not questions about where to go or what's open and what's closed. And unfortunately, we do get a lot of calls like that. But that's probably the main thing that you can do for us. I can tell you that we're also screening the calls through dispatch and asking some screening questions for COVID. So our first responders are prepared when they get on scene. We've also changed some protocols in regards to how we respond to unattended deaths, how we respond in the nursing homes, preparing ourselves for the personal protection equipment before we walk into the house. The other thing I guess we could ask is if we can if we can take your report over the phone or FaceTime or Zoom or however we need to do it. We would like to do that to minimize exposure, not only to the officers, but exposure to you, as our officers are in this environment, and we can't control where we go. We have to go where we go, and we would not want to infect someone else out there either. So if it doesn't require a face-to-face meeting, let's find some other way to do that. With that being said, it is still business as usual. We're still handling all calls, and we'll get to the scene. We'll ask for a little bit more patience on those lower priority calls because it's taken us a little bit longer to address some of the calls. So hopefully that answers any questions, and I'll look at the Q&A box there if anybody has any follow-ups. We can sure address those at the time. Mark, did you have anything else to say on that?
Oh, I think you covered it, Jeff. We did alter our protocols, and just for the community, we've been essentially preparing for an outbreak like this for the last 20 years. So when this started here in the county, for the fire and EMS world, and it transferred over to the law enforcement world as well, we had 20,000 N95 masks, just to give you an idea of how prepared we were for something like this to happen. We knew it was a matter of time before we had some level of epidemic pandemic following H1N1 and H5N1, et cetera. So we were very well prepared. We initiated protocols early on in the dispatch center to screen out calls. In the fire and EMS world, between us and in partnership with Ada County paramedics, we established what's called a rapid response vehicle. That's a dedicated unit that responds only to COVID calls. That unit has been very active since we started. And then to answer Senator Winter's question with regards to testing of first responders, that was something we've also built a long-standing relationship with Emergency Responders Health Clinic and Dr. Rob Hilvers. And very early on, he started getting testing kits in. So we have been able to test first responders since this started. They send that to the state lab with a high priority turnaround. So we're getting results on our first responders within 24 to 48 hours. So we have been prepared. We have daily contact with the hospitals to look at ER surge and ICU bed capacity and ventilator capacity. And so far, again, to use the mayor's term, knock on wood a little bit, things have been good. We know any return from an order will have to be calculated to make sure that we flatten that curve and continue to flatten it. But so far, so good on the first responder side.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Next question we have, do you anticipate a slow opening for events in the community? Will there be, yes, sir.
Why don't we stick, I think you skipped over a question that we got from Mayor Tammy. Why don't we say, since we're right there in this area, why don't we
Yeah, absolutely.
talk about that one?
Okay. Mayor Tammy would like to know, how are our first responders doing? Have they been able to stay safe during this pandemic? And does the city have the appropriate protection gear to keep them safe at this time?
Yeah. And I think that, you know, between Mark and Jeff, you kind of answered the last 2/3 of that, but maybe you can speak to how are the first responders doing that are out there?
I can go ahead and kick this off, and I might turn this over to our acting fire chief. Robert alluded to, I've moved up a little bit during the COVID, so I'd like to turn this over to our acting fire chief, Charlie Butterfield, to talk about the state of firefighters, the morale of the crews, and then maybe get to Chief Levy.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. The morale of the crews has been good. In talking to all of the different shifts, different captains, the battalion chiefs, they have been out on the front lines. They have been seeing a lot of sick patients in the community and making sure that those people are transported to the hospital. But overall, the morale and the actions of our firefighters and first responders has been very positive. They've addressed this, understanding that their role in the community as providers of safety and providers of the health of the community has really been very strong. And so they do have all of the right PPE, as Chief Niemeyer mentioned earlier. We already had a pretty decent amount of supply of that to begin with. We instituted some protocols very early in this to make sure that our first responders were wearing the proper PPE. As soon as we knew that we had community spread, we instituted a very strong policy to make sure that essentially every person that they came in contact with, they were protected, to make sure that they didn't run that risk of acquiring COVID-19. And as Chief Levy mentioned, we haven't had any positive tests of COVID-19. And I think that really has a lot to do with our early deployment of really strong protocols for them. But I would say all in all, they have really taken on this challenge very well. And as I mentioned, morale is strong with what they're doing and the service that they're providing to our citizens in our community.
Robert, just let me finish up, I guess, on the police side of things. We have amazing staff, and we knew that before this. And I could not be more proud of how our first responders have adapted. Not only those that are working in the field, but those support staff in the office. They've been unbelievably flexible and understanding. But like everybody else, they got the question of, you know, are we doing too much? Are we not doing enough? What's going to happen? What can we do to make this better? You know, as we're dealing with this unknown enemy out there. And so I think you see a little bit of adrenaline flowing when you get those unattended deaths now, but they still, they slow down, they suit up, and they deal with it. So I've been really, really happy with how we've responded, and morale is really unbelievable. We've instituted reaching out to our remote workers at home just to make sure that even though we can't see them, that they're not forgotten. Getting a lot of positive feedback from them as well. So all is good. As far as personal protection equipment, the city's been great. We've been able to acquire all of our needs. We have an adequate supply, and our procurement officer is out there still looking for additional for long term. Really, our only needs are right now is no contact thermometers. We've ordered a couple, but they've been delayed because of the need. But as we get ready to start up our police academy, we want to make sure that we're able to check the temperatures of all those participants. And then anticipating a limited opening or an opening of the building back to the general public is making sure we have the tools necessary to still screen and take those precautions. So we're doing really, really, really well. Now we're just kind of sitting idle and waiting for this next direction from the stay-at-home order.
Awesome. Thank you, Chiefs. Next question we have, do you anticipate a slow opening for the events in the community? Will there be a limit to large-scale events plans for the next 6 months, 25, then 50, then 100 or more?
I think that that's a great question, and unfortunately, I don't think that we have a great answer right now. You know, I'm going to borrow something from my college president, who did a webinar last Friday talking about the state of the college, and asked questions: will kids be going to school on campus in August? And the question is, we don't know. You know, whether it's a slow reopening, everything just goes back online right away, whether that's an individual business, our schools, our community events, our programs, our classes, you know, and even going into our, what we have, you know, we need to do a shelter reservation at our park. You know, all that stuff I think is up in the air, but I'll turn it over to Steve to maybe talk about what he's seen and what we're doing in our parks right now.
Thank you, Mayor. Hope everyone can hear me okay. I think you said it well. There's a lot that we don't know. We do anticipate that there will likely, we're hoping that there will be some measured steps where, okay, now groups of 10 are okay, now groups of 50, now groups of 100 or more, and maybe it is ramped up. But the reality is that those guidelines have not come out yet, and we will follow them as they do. For now, we continue to plan for community events, hoping they might happen, but we are also preparing ourselves for the fact that it may not. And all we can say is that right now everything is on hold.
Got it. Thank you. A follow-up question that comes with that is, while we move into warmer weather, what actions is the city going to take to prepare for round 2 if that comes about?
And I think I'm going to former Chief Niemeyer kind of talked to this one a little bit, but I think it's important to understand that, you know, we are working collaboratively with others, not just the state, but here in the Treasure Valley between Ada and Canyon County, along with our hospital systems. So it's not just what the actions the city is going to take to prepare for round two, but what actions are we going to take? Because it's really, there are no city lines when it comes to COVID-19 or really any issue of this nature from that standpoint. So it's going to require us to stay vigilant and monitor where we are as a region and where we need to be in order to prepare for that. And I think that's kind of the end question. What it comes down to is when we open up and what the impacts of that opening up are going to be, are we prepared to handle that? Chief, I'll let you take it from there.
Thanks, Mayor. As the mayor alluded to, I applaud the elected officials throughout the entire valley. They meet every Monday and Friday in a conference call. That's mayors from cities big and small, and it's both Canyon and Ada County commissioners. And they have an opportunity to hear from the health districts, both central and southwest, as well as the hospital system, St. Al, St. Luke's, and West Valley. That is the type of information we need to make great decisions coming out of this. I think if you study what's going on around us, any decision to come out of any order would be calculated. It would be measured, and the intent would be to then monitor the new data and the new information to see if we're seeing any kind of increase in the spread of the virus or an increase in hospitalizations. Anything that we do to flatten the curve or pause the curve is done in an effort to keep the ICU bed capacity good. It's to keep ventilator capacity good and to keep the ERs from being overwhelmed. So I think any measure that we do coming out of this, warm weather is a little bit of a concern because people will get out more and they'll socialize more. So we'll be watching that closely. To the point of a second wave, all the science from the CDC and other leading authorities that have been studying this does say there will be a second wave and potentially a third wave. The goal is to slow the spread enough that vaccines can be developed. We hope that FDA testing to see if you've built up antibodies to this is going to come out in the next 2 weeks here in Idaho. Crush the Curve has done a great job of getting even more tests out there that we can start tracking. The more data we have, the better decisions we can make as we move through this entire process. Hopefully that answered the question there.
Thanks, Chief.
Awesome, thank you. Staying on the park side of things, can you tape off the climbing rocks in the parks? People seem to think it's okay to play on them because they are not taped off. Also, there are still sports practices occurring at Keith Bird Legacy Park. Can you guys start patrolling or something?
Well, the short answer is yes. I appreciate that the nature of the call is focused on trying to keep people safe. So that is our first priority. I will have our parks crew go check those the climbing rocks. They are part of the playground. The playgrounds are closed, so if they're not taped off, we'll get them taped off. I'll also reach out to the questioner about the team sports activities that are happening to try and gather some more information about when and where that's happening so we can follow up a little better.
Awesome, thank you. A submitted live question we have. Many of us have had more time on our hands to prepare for the summer, which brings to mind goat heads. These have long been an issue. It has been said that the spread of these weeds is a higher priority. What is the city doing to educate and be a participant in the solution? What is the best time to spray at home and in public spaces?
Well, I'm going to open this up to any member of our leadership team that has the information about goat heads. I know it has been something that's come up in the past, and we have put it out in previous years. But I see our Parks and Rec director, who probably has to deal with these somewhat in our parks, has opened up his mic, so I'm going to turn this over to him.
Yeah, I need my park superintendent who has the knowledge of the best times to spray and what to use, because I'm not the expert on that myself. But I can tell you that for the areas that we maintain, which is along the city maintained pathways, crews have already been out and spraying. Of course, the goat heads don't come on until mid to later in the summer, and we do keep an eye on them on the areas that we maintain. So I can only speak to the areas that we focus on and maintain as city parks and recreation and in parks and along pathways. They are an issue citywide, and more we can do to get rid of those weeds, I'm certainly supportive of. I'd have to reach out separately for some of the specific details about the when and what to use.
Thank you, Steve. Next question we have, would like to get a list of vacant positions through the agency, as well as what the city's plan is regarding filling these. I strongly believe that the city should consider keeping these positions vacant for now due to the economic impact. This includes public safety positions. There will be impacts from lower sales, property, transit, occupancy taxes, building related revenue, etc. As a resident who understands city finances, I appreciate the city having reserves way beyond some of the surrounding agencies. As the city begins laying the groundwork for the 2021 budget, there needs to be serious considerations for scaling back, some freezing, some expansion plans for using reserves for one-time projects. Would love to hear your thoughts.
All right, thanks. Thank you. And, you know, we've been looking at this situation, and I know Todd kind of touched on some of this earlier where we talked about keeping an eye on the financial impacts. And yeah, I think it's important that we be mindful of not just the financial impacts from our standpoint, but also from the community standpoint in terms of where they're going to be on that front. We do have healthy reserves, and as alluded to, and some of that is being planned for our future capital project needs. But it's going to be a balance. We will look at all of these things as we move forward and make decisions at the appropriate time. As of right now, the projections that are out there, I don't think warrant a halt on positions, at least filling vacant positions, because many of those are positions that we will need out in the community at some point in time. But we will continue to monitor as we move forward. And so I'm going to see if our council president has anything that he'd like to add to this one in terms of his thoughts on the financial as we start preparing for the upcoming budget. If not, we can turn it over to Todd to see if he has anything as well. But Treg, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Not a ton. You know, as everyone knows, one of our most important responsibilities as council members is the budget and to be good stewards of the people's money. And this year is going to be interesting because of all the, what happened during our legislative sessions and the attention that's been brought to property taxes and such. So this year is going to be interesting. I know that I'm going to take a quicker, harder look at the budget, and I know that I've had discussions with my fellow council members as well. So be rest assured that this year is going to be an important year for our budget, and we'll see what happens. But I do feel that, being good stewards of the people's money is important, but we also have to take into consideration city services and making sure that our citizens are safe, and that we're putting ourselves in a good, viable financial position going forward. And so thankfully in the past, those who have come before us have done a great job in the city of Meridian, making sure that we're in a good financial position, and hopefully we can continue to do so.
Todd, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, thank you, Robert. Nothing too much more. Like you mentioned, our goal is to be proper stewards of the scarce resources that the city manages. We can reiterate to the citizens that we do maintain our fund balances and our reserves based on the policy we passed. Again, those are still in sound condition. And I agree with the question that we need to take into consideration the COVID-19 situation and make sure we make proper decisions that best supports our citizens and our community members, and also continues to provide the services. So again, we agree with the question that we need to take into consideration everything as we build our fiscal 21 budget. And I can reassure you that Robert has already started that, along with Councilman Burnt, that we are already discussing maintaining those kind of approaches for fiscal year 21 budget. And again, I think we're in good shape. Thank you.
And if I could just add just the one last thing as we close out that people may not always realize about city budgets is, we collect impact fees, and impact fees are the things that pay for, most of our capital projects. They can't be used for other needs of the city where they to come up at that point in time as well. So sometimes postponing the capital project may seem like the right approach, but it may not be an approach that will help us in our current situation. So all those are the types of things that we'll have to look at and take into consideration when we move forward with the budget.
Thank you, Robert. Staying on the finance side, given the tremendous growth experienced by the city over the past decade, why are we not experiencing economies of scale with regard to the government services and seeing our property taxes go down?
Well, property taxes are tricky. That's a simple way of saying it, and I'm oversimplifying it. But there's several different facets. Your property taxes could go up and your neighbor's property taxes could go down. Values of homes have so much to do with the amount of property taxes you pay. And it's not just a matter of whether or not your property value goes up or down. It matters how everyone's property values in the city move up or down that can impact what you pay. In addition, there's also several, one of the largest things on there is typically school districts and bonds and levies that can definitely impact the amount that people pay from that standpoint. So economies of scale do make sense. And I think that it's over time, as we've been in a growing city, trying to find out what those economies are. It takes time to sometimes realize some of those as we look at it. But I kind of look at as a growing city like a growing school district. You can put a lot of kids into a school and you really get that economy of scale as they're overcrowded, but eventually you got to go build a new building to put them into, and you will lose that economy of scale and have to take on new expenses in order to provide those services. Cities can much be the same way in terms of when you bring on a new fire station, it may cost more to bring that on, but over time, as you add more residents and tax base, it can help level off those costs. So it is, I think, an ebb and flow in terms of how the tax base evolves in a city, but there are several things that are not necessarily in our control. But about I think 28 to 29% of the tax base is in our control of what you see, but the other 71, 72% is not. Todd, anything I missed or anything you'd like to add, or Treg?
No, Robert, I think you got all the good talking points. I appreciate it.
Okay.
With the stay-at-home orders and trying to bring on talent to the city, how is your team flexing to the digital interview world?
Well, I haven't personally been involved in any of our interviews so far since we've been doing the stay-at-home, but I'm going to turn this over to our Human Resources Director, Crystal Ritchie, and maybe if there's one of our directors who's had to go through it on their side as well from their experience, they can speak to that. So, Crystal?
Good morning, everyone. Great question. And I invite any of the directors who've had teams participate in our remote interviewing. That has transitioned very well. The feedback that we've received has been very encouraging. People are continuing to engage in the interview process. Skype interviews were something that we have always had into our recruitment process for certain positions that we just transitioned to all positions across the city. All of the city staff have come together really well. Our IT department has ensured that we've had the technology available to make it a smooth interview, just the same as the experience that you're having today with Zoom. So it's been a positive approach to a difficult situation. Obviously, we would prefer to be in person if we could, but certainly it's been a great positive experience and something that has allowed the city to continue to move forward.
Anyone else been on the receiving end that would like to chime in? I imagine it might have been your staff, but Chief Levy?
Yeah, I just thought I would chime in on one area. I actually had the opportunity to sit on the interview panel for the new Boise Police Chief. We interviewed a gentleman yesterday, one of the finalists, and we're going to interview the next one this afternoon. It was weird it was different, but it worked. I can tell you that I would have loved to have been able to do the interview in person, because you do miss some things, and you do have to deal with technology and some of the fading in and out of the conversations and such. But we adapted, and it definitely has its place in the process, maybe on initial interviews or initial screenings. But I still think that you would want to have that when you're down to your finalists or your final pick. You still want to have that in-person conversation, that visit on campus. Really, you want them to get a feel for your organization and see if not only that they're a right fit for us, but we're a right fit for them as well. And so I wouldn't get away from doing in-person interviews, but it definitely has its positives.
Steve, are you looking to add in? All right, Tim, looks like Steve's frozen up.
Got it. Okay. Next question we have regarding this. How much longer will the city shutdown continue? For sale signs are going up all over Tuscany subdivision where you live, Mayor, and people need to go back to their jobs ASAP, or there will be a massive recession when people are forced to file bankruptcy and move somewhere else.
Well, the first thing I'd say is we're not unique. You know, there's nothing going on in Meridian that's not going on in any other community in Idaho, and quite frankly, around the nation. So, you know, I think that everyone is grappling with this issue of how do we reopen, when do we reopen, and what are the short-term and long-term impacts from that standpoint. You know, it was my early on when I the social distancing order. That was an effort to try to make sure that we maintained as much commerce in our city as we could, because I understood that when businesses are forced to shut down, it can limit paychecks. But I think that the federal government has stepped in huge ways to provide resources to people to try to help them through these times, through the unemployment benefits that they're offering, the stimulus checks that they're providing to people. It's not the way we want to live. It's not what we'd expect, but it will help. So we will do what we can as quickly as we can, but we got to maintain the health and safety of the individuals. And as we reopen parts of the economy or all the economy, you know, it's going to take a while for people to ramp up one way or the other. I don't think we're going to go back to just where we were the day after any sort of stay-at-home orders are lifted. It will take businesses time as they've lay people off to even bring talent back in if they want to come back in. So we'll do what we can as appropriate. Treg, anything you'd like to add from your perspective?
Sure. You know, these are tough decisions with no good answers, in my opinion. You have one end, you have risk of life, and the other end, you have risk to quality of life and freedom. And I just hope that the governor and those who around him have as much data as possible, and that they're using sound data and using strong matrices to make sure that the decision that they make is best for all. So it's a tough one. I know that we can't be cooped up forever. I just in my own house, it's crazy what's going on here. The kiddos are all over the place and wanting to get back to school and to get back to normalcy. And so I have faith in the governor. I have faith in his team, and hopefully they make the right decision using data and matrix that will put us in the best possible place going forward.
Got it. Awesome, Treg. A follow-up to that coming in live. How are we measuring the success of the shutdown?
Well, I think sometimes the best thing to measure is by what you don't see. And I think that's why what you don't see is terms of us having the type of problems in our healthcare facilities and systems that you see in other parts of the country or the United States. You can look at the deaths that we've had in the area or the state as well as a metric in terms of the shutdown. But I'll see if Chief Niemeyer has anything that he'd like to add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'll just go back to the stay-at-home order. First and foremost is an attempt to make sure the hospitals stay solid, that they can accept new patients, that they can treat patients that are sick. If you watched the news yesterday, you saw a woman get discharged after being on a ventilator for 14 days. That's the type of treatment right now that folks need that can track this virus. I think in Ada County, we've done a really good job, as I alluded to earlier. We're daily talking to Central District Health. We're talking to the CEOs of both St. Al's and St. Luke's to get updates on hospitalization, on where they're at. They're in a good place and they've stayed in a good place. And I think that's because of the order that was given. As we come out of that, when that happens, we'll continue to keep a good eye on that and continue that communication with the hospitals to make sure that they're not being overwhelmed if we see spread again. So I think those are the metrics that we are continually monitoring and staying in close contact with the folks that we need to be talking to see if we are being effective. And I would say to this point, certainly in Ada County, we have been very effective.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief. Final submitted question that we have is the Meridian Comprehensive Plan states that one of our goals is to, quote, preserve prime farmland within the area of city impact to maintain rural character and provide opportunities for local produce and continued farming operations, end quote. Yet the Flume does not have a rural or farm designation. Why doesn't the Flume reflect this important goal?
Yeah, that's a good question. Go ahead, Robert.
I'm going to turn most of this over to Caleb Hood, our planning manager. But I think maybe the first part of this, and while it may seem two sides of the coin, is if we're planning for rural farmland, we're not planning for a city from that standpoint. And I think that's part of what was sometimes often missed in this context, where if we put that in our future land use, then it's technically should be in Ada County and not part of the city of Meridian. But I'll let Caleb get into the more nuanced details.
Thank you, Mayor. It is a good question, and it was a big topic, especially as we developed our comprehensive plan late last year. A lot of the conversation at the elected official level was about the preserving agricultural heritage of Meridian. We have a rich agricultural heritage, but there's this interface of the growth we've been experiencing over the last 10, 15, almost 20 years now. And so how do we rectify that? How do we square that with our comprehensive plan? As the mayor just mentioned, we're planning for an urban city, but we recognize our agricultural heritage. So how do we respect that and allow that to continue, but maybe not encourage it into the future long term? A lot of the policies, the ones stated in the question, actually, if you look at some of the action items that the city is looking at to, again, respect, preserve that agricultural heritage, has a lot to do with growing from the inside out and allowing those agricultural practices to continue where appropriate. And largely that's on the fringe or at our boundaries with CUNA, with NAMPA, and really promoting and encouraging those for as long as they can to continue into practice. And we're also evaluating, and this is just starting, to ask our community members, and COVID, certainly all the planning, not a lot of the questions thus far have been about COVID. Planning is a lot about our community, and it's tough to get that input from our community members when we can't be face-to-face with them. But we do have an open space and ag survey that's out there. We're trying to understand how much the community does value agricultural land, and further fine-tune our goals and policies to make sure that we are, everyone still needs to be able to eat, but Meridian's right in the center of the valley. So there's a lot of development pressures in Meridian, and there will be going forward, being, again, in the heart of the Treasure Valley. Agricultural lands forever and ever just probably aren't in the cards for Meridian. But again, we do want to allow the right to farm in our community, in our area of impact, in those appropriate locations. And so we'll continue to evaluate that with our community. But we are planning for an urbanizing city, a rapidly urbanizing city. So hopefully that answers most of the question.
Awesome. Thank you, Caleb. Had a live question come in towards first responders. Just to clarify an earlier comment, you mentioned that no first responders have tested positive. Is that Meridian only or all of Ada County?
Robert, I can take this one. To clarify, that's City of Meridian employees. Nobody has tested positive for COVID. We don't get that protected HIPAA information from other jurisdictions on their employees. So just to clarify the answer on that, that's no City of Meridian first responders have tested positive.
Got it. Awesome. Another live question came in. There's a bridge project waiting on the Nampa Marine Irrigation District to take action. This person also mentioned they've had conversation with Mayor Robert about a massive transit system within the valley that would go toward the all quarters north, south, east, and west. Any update on traction made on those endeavors with any of your fellow mayor peers?
No, so far, most part of my administration, more than a third, almost half of it has been related to the COVID-19 issue. For the first 100 days, I've really been spending time interacting with people. Yesterday, I finished having my last meet and greet conversation with ACHD commissioners, continuing to do those type of things. But I think everyone else has been preoccupied regarding COVID-19 at this point in time.
Great. Thank you, Robert. That is all the submitted questions we have right now. Do we have any other live questions from any of the attendees? Robert, I don't have anything else here. Is there any remarks or anything you'd like to open it up to?
You know, the only thing I would like to say is a thank you for everyone well, I guess we just got to, it was a thank you as well, but just a thank you for the people that got on the call, that took part of it, the people that submitted the questions in advance, so we kind of knew what people really want to hear about, and hopefully we've gotten some good information. It is our intention to put this out to the community so that they can get this update as well. So the live people is great, but we'll also get it out so other people can hear what was on the hearts and minds of the community and the responses from our departments. So I'll see if Councilman Burke has any final parting remarks, and then if not, we will close this up.
I just want to say thank you. There's a fair amount of people that were on this live virtual coffee with the mayor this morning, probably more than the normal events. So I just want to say thank you. I know we're all busy and we have a lot going on, but to take time out to participate and get engaged this morning is very appreciative. So thank you so much. Happy day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Tim, I think we're good.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Robert.
Thanks.